Now video and both are there, sir.
Both are there, but let me
make it full
now.
screen.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible and the slide is visible.
Thank God. I start.
So I think Bhatindu sir, you introduce, then we can start now already.
You introduce, sir. Manoj, you introduce.
Okay, okay. So, dear participant, good afternoon. After today's lunch session, we are going to start a very eminent scholar and very good Professor KV Reddy. Professor KV Reddy is a head of Department of Political Science, Mizoram University. And today he is going to talk about the Indian secularism and minority apprehensions. See, present time, we are the academicians and we are seeing there is a lot of apprehensions about the current time, about the minorities and what actually secularism and what the constitutions they is protecting their interest and their welfare. So today, sir is going to talk about the secularism, very important topic and one of the basic fundamental things of our Indian constitutions. So, sir, welcome you from on behalf of the HRDC and my personal behalf and Professor Bhatindu Singh, the co-coordinator of this orientation FIP program. I welcome you in this lecture session and handing over the session to you for your lecture, sir. Ready, sir?
Okay. Thank you, Professor Manoj Vermaji, and my old colleague, Bhatindu Singh, professor in the Commerce Department and Dean perhaps at the moment. So as Professor Manoj, the HRDC team leader, has just announced about the topic and myself. So I have this session with 14 slides. The slides are not that attractive, nor are they give you any new material, but still this sort of presentation will help both of us, me and you all, to be attentive on the theme that we are going to discuss for the next 1 hour or so. So as the topic that I've chosen for this FIP program is Indian secularism and minority apprehensions. You know, I am basically a student of politics, head of the department at the moment, and I have been teaching several years. And as part of this Indian politics or Indian political system, the government and politics in India, we come across the Constitution of India as the main component of Indian politics, because it is this Constitution that that influences the politics of the day, the state government at the national level, at the state level, so on and so forth. Now, when we talk about Constitution, the Constitution has given very many aspects of secularism indirectly, but there is hardly any mention of secularism in the entire Constitution. You know, our Constitution is very bulky, but yet there is hardly mention. In fact, there was a debate during the Constituent Assembly meetings. One K.T. Shah wanted to put in the form of secularism in the Constitution, but Dr. Ambedkar and others were having objections to it, because Constitution is basically a mechanism to help governments to organize, to regulate the individuals, citizens, to lead their life. So beyond that, Ambedkar was not feeling it necessary. And secondly, Ambedkar was also feeling that there are many aspects of secularism that are there very much in the provisions, whether it is fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy, and others. Therefore, there is no need of secularism to be included in the Constitution in a full form. And that is one. But you know what happens at the time of amendment in 1976, when Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, was the Prime Minister through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. This word secularism was added in the Constitution. That too in the part of preamble. You know, many consider preamble as not part and parcel of the Constitution. Rather, it is just an index. It is just a preface to the Constitution. Therefore, it doesn't hold any weight. It doesn't carry much weight, even if secularism was added in the preamble of the Constitution. So, be that as it may, but India has always been a secular society and therefore secular state as well, secular government as well. So this is at one level. At the other level, I'm trying to just explain my topic first, and then I'll move into the other slides. So then there is another dimension of this lecture, that is minorities. Who are minorities? Things like that. So minorities, are they in terms of numbers or otherwise? So this is something that we are going to discuss, but in the context of this lecture and secularism too, minorities are those who don't subscribe to the majoritarian views religiously and otherwise. So they are basically the Muslims, Christians, Sikh, Isai, Jains, Buddhists, so on and so forth. Only Hindus constitute the majoritarian system in India, and therefore they seem to have a different viewpoint about secularism. And also, you see, secularism is not an Indian origin term, an Indian term. It is an alien term in a way, because it's considered to be a Western concept initially, that I will also discuss at a later stage. So that is the reason why maybe our constitution makers, the forefathers, did not feel it necessary to include secularism, because it may mean many things to many people. So there is no single meaning for secularism. Therefore, I describe it as Indian secularism. As to what extent Indian secularism affects the minorities adversely or otherwise, and therefore their apprehensions. And this one can talk on and on for hours together, but since I need to confine myself to the 1.5 hours or so, so I'll focus only on recent trends while giving you some backdrop. So, as part of introduction, the question I raised is, what is this concept called secularism? Is it an ideology, political ideology, or a way of life, as many people think? Personally, I feel that it is largely an ideology as far as the government is concerned, as far as state is concerned. The state and government implement it as an ideology, political ideology. Otherwise, if society practices secularism, then I may say that it's a way of life, that people belonging to various faiths, various religions, various walks of life practice it. But I don't think this sort of practice is being visible as far as our country is concerned. So to my mind, secularism is more as a political ideology that has been practiced, that has been implemented in the country. In a way, it has been imposed on the people. Whether people accept it or not, they will have to undergo the secular provisions, secular practices of the day. Now, minorities, as I mentioned short while ago, numerically weak. Weak means small. Numerically weak communities, religious wise or otherwise. So the example that I had given you, as far as Indian context is concerned, the Muslims, 10 to 15% of the population, and there are other smaller populations belong to various religions. We don't focus much on that, but mostly on this Islamic component of Indian population that we consider as the minorities, and what their apprehensions are. As a matter of fact, for the past several decades in the country is something that we may look at it. Now, as democratic state, Indian state is a democratic state, as you all know, ever since we attained independence. Majority rules in democracy. So whenever majority rules, majority in terms of votes, but votes are in terms of religious votes or other votes. It depends on election to election as to how people, the political parties campaign and leaders appeal to the people and how people respond. So majority rule means majority people will have their representatives elected as the ruling party. And at the same time, democratic state does not mean that it's only majority that rules, but minority representation cannot be set aside. So the minorities do have their representation in proportion to their population figures. So accordingly, usually political parties do give representation to various minorities, see, on the basis of their population in their respective constituencies, be they Lok Sabha or Assembly in various states. Now, as far as Indian society is concerned, you all know that it is largely a plural society where there are a number of identities are attached with every Indian. So Indians have got their national identity, they've got their regional identity, they've got their religious identity, they've got their caste identity, community identity, tribe identity, linguistic identity. So to that extent, Indian society is described as a plural society. But of all these identities, I think the religious identity is something that influences more when we discuss politics, because in politics numbers matter. So the party which controls maximum numbers in the legislative houses, with the parliament or assembly. So if it is on the basis of religious influence, then one can understand. So this is what is the character of Indian society. Now again, in Indian society, we need to get into the state. The society has its agency called state. It is state that runs the society, you know. Indian society has been going on and on. Whether it was united or not, that's a different issue. But what we call today India or Indian society has had its state for the first time after 1947, 15th August, because it's only a state is something that should have sovereignty also. As a student of politics, some of you may be aware that if you want to call a state, then it should have people, that is population, territory, government, and also sovereignty. So Indian state, Indian nation, in political terminology, we call it Indian state. So it has got a sovereignty, supreme power only after British rule was ended. So from 1947 onwards, we describe India as Indian state. So Indian state is to be run by the government of India at the national level through parliament, legislative house at the central government. So majoritarian power is based on the election victories, election success, because it is head counting, as you know, in democracy. So see, on the basis of number of votes that a party secured or number of seats that a party secured, you will have government being formed and parliament running the show. But when you have this majoritarian rule, majoritarian power, the minority feels a little suffocated. Because when the majority is of 80% size, minority is of 15% or 20% or 5%. So it is very obvious that minority will have predicament. Minority feels it troublesome to continue in a government that is controlled by a majoritarian party. So for a government to be continued, to be run, then you need a polity, that is political process, politics of the day. So, political parties do take different positions, sometimes pro-communal, anti-communal. So ultimately, or pro-secular, anti-secular, ultimately they go by the vote bank politics, you see. So whichever vote bank is dominant, whether it is Hindu vote bank or Islamic vote bank or whatever Christian vote bank, whichever vote bank is dominant in terms of numbers, okay. So it is based on that. That will decide, that is decisive as far as taking pro-anti positions with regard to secularism or communalism. Okay. Then constitutional provisions. There are several constitutional provisions, and as I had mentioned short while ago, that there are fundamental rights. I may elaborate at a relevant stage. Constitutional provisions are there, directive principles of state policy, and various other parts that that show us, that tell us as to how secularism is implicit in the Constitution, despite the fact that it was not at all included in so many words, secularism, a secular state, but yet it is implied. As far as preamble, I had just mentioned that only in 1976 that it has become part of the Constitution, that too in the preamble for the first time. But prior to 1976, there was no mention of secularism in the Constitution. Yes, there are judicial verdicts. Besides the governments, judiciary is also there to support secularism. Because secularism is something that is considered as the basic structure of the Constitution. So minus secularism, you cannot visualize Constitution and its basic structure. Therefore, if you want to protect, if you want to safeguard the Constitution, then the basic structure that consists of, because in Bommai, S.R. Bommai case, the Supreme Court clearly mentioned that secularism is also one of the elements of basic structure. Therefore, basic structure should not be disturbed. You may have political parties with 400 plus seats once Rajiv Gandhi secured in the wake of assassination of her mother, Indira Gandhi. But then Rajiv Gandhi could not amend the Constitution the way he liked. He could not go against the basic structure of the Constitution. So there are judiciary or judicial wings, judicial institutions that protect the Constitution in a way. Now, secularism as to how it is understood. You see, as I mentioned short while ago, it's a Western idea basically. One can trace the origins of secularism in the Western context, and particularly in the European context, wherein the kings and popes used to conflict, used to fight against each other for supremacy, to control the society. The secularism came into existence because as long as religion was dominant in the society and in the state, in the European context, the kings were secondary. Kings were subordinate to the papal authority or popes or church authority. But over a period of time, particularly since the age of reason, enlightenment, and after Renaissance, Reformation in the Europe, that these ideas had become very popular. So that was responsible for the strengthening the concept of secularism in the Western context. So to that extent, it's a Western idea. And one British reformer used this particular word secularism in his works. George Jacob, Holyoake, 1851, you remember, way back in 19th century, this was there used for the first time. And then the countries like UK, US, France, Turkey had also adopted this particular concept in their state affairs, in their public affairs, political affairs. Now, as far as initial understanding of secularism was concerned, there were different meanings attributed, different meanings attached to this concept. Initially, it was about anti-theocracy, it was about atheism, it was about religious neutrality, as if, those who are secular should not believe in God. Those who are secular should not believe in God. In a way, it is against religion, against God, something like that. This sort of notion was propagated during that time. So that is how the secularism was misunderstood initially. That's why there were many opponents to the notion of secularism, because people were mostly, if not fully, conscious of their religious life, religious lifestyle. People were leading religious life, and they were subscribing to the views of religious institutions. Therefore, for the first time when secularism appeared on the political horizon, then there were very few takers. Not many were enthused with the idea of secularism. But over a period of time, it happened, and Europe had become, a place for secular society. That's in the backdrop of age of reason, as I mentioned, enlightenment and all. Then that is the reason why, what I would like to tell you, that there is hardly any unanimous understanding. There is no unanimity on the actual content of secularism as to what it is and how secularism is to be understood, how it is to be interpreted. There was hardly any. Therefore, it was interpreted by many scholars in different ways, okay, in different countries. Now, when we come back to Indian context, it's politically, secularism is a political project.
Professor Reddy.
Yes, please.
Sorry to disturb, but your screen is all blank. We are unable to see anything.
Oh,
yes. Now visible. Now it is secularism as it's understood.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, but it has gone blank.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, now continue.
I don't know what happened. Please be telling.
Okay, sir. Continue.
Maybe I need to touch it now and then.
Yes. Okay.
I'll try. Yeah, when I take more time, perhaps.
Keep on touching. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Screensaver, I think. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Continue, sir.
So what I'm trying to discuss at the moment is that, yes, if that is what is the understanding or misunderstanding of secularism in the Western context, now how about India? Because that's what is our focus today. So in India too, there is hardly any unanimity. There are different scholars viewing secularism differently. But mostly it's a political project. So Professor Rajiv Bhargava, who was professor in JNU, Delhi University, and he was also leading CSDS in Delhi, was one who worked mostly on the secular project. He authored a couple of books, and most of his writings were focusing on this particular thing, secularism. One of the books that I had gone through is Secularism and its critics, themes and politics. So he was trying to touch upon, or he was trying to relate the Western context and Indian context as to how secularism was being discussed. Then you have Christopher Jefferson, who wrote many books.
Professor Reddy, sorry again to disturb. It's again gone blank. Okay, now it's again back.
So maybe I should touching.
Yes. I think mouse you keep on moving, sir.
Only my finger I think.
Okay, that also will do, sir. Yes.
It's
Okay.
laptop, right? I'll do that.
Okay.
I'll do that. Just they can take down once that slide. I'll discuss point by point.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So there's one Rajiv Bhargav, after that Christopher Jafferlet, who wrote many, including The Fate of Secularism in India. And then there is another Ram Punyani, who was an IIT Bombay professor, who was also responsible for advancing the study of secularism. And he was also an activist, a secular activist from Bombay. So besides these, there were one Professor Zoya Hassan from JNU, who was also responsible for focusing on secular studies in universities and elsewhere. So, but they have different understandings. I cannot discuss all that at the moment, but yet these are some known people as far as secularism and its theory and practice is concerned. Now, if you go back into history, because you need to have sense of history if you want to understand the secularism and the recent trends, as to how Indian society has always been a secular society, whether one may want to describe it as such or not, but Indian society has been a secular society. Secular society is that society which provides scope for different religious people, different communities, different people. In a way, it's like a multicultural society. So it's only secular society that gives scope for a multicultural society. And as a matter of fact, India has always been, whether in the ancient period, medieval period, or thereafter, though Hinduism was dominant at one point of time, Islam at another point of time, Christianity during British time. So religious dominance has always been there, but yet there were hardly any conflicts of of serious nature. So this is what is Indian context, where secularism has been followed, if not practiced fully. Now, after India became independent, then you witness a partition, right? 1947, 14th August, 15th August, and just before and just after, Hindu-Muslim divide, as to how communal riots took place, various parts of the country where Hindu-Muslim populations were in a significant size. And you also know Gandhi's killing, Mahatma Gandhi's assassination by an Godse, was considered to be an RSS follower at the time, or the Hindu fanatic. That is how people used to describe. So this is all for the sake of secularism in a way. So whether it is Mahatma Gandhi or others, they have always been in favor of pursuing, preaching, practicing secularism in the Indian context. So before independence and after too. No, but after independence, it has become a political secularism. Political secularism. It has taken a political shape as it is subjected to vote bank politics, and therefore you have majority religions, you have minority religions. So when there is an action from majority religion, there will be a reaction from minority religions. So that way, there were political parties having subscribing to different religious influences, so became majority and minority. So they were accordingly appeasing the communities like that. But at the end of the day, see, since majority had its say in the government, in the state, in the society, so minority was at risk, minority was at stake, minority interests, minority rights were not being protected the way they were expected to be. But at the end of the day, only when we protect minority rights, then perhaps what we expect, social harmony, social peace, is possible. See, unlike theocratic states, secular states are different. What I mean by theocratic states are states that are opposed to secular states. States that subscribe to a particular religion. For example, Pakistan, Islamic State. Nepal Hindu state, like that several Arab states. So they subscribe to a particular uh, religion. They are known as theocratic states. So religion is what they propagate, they protect, they promote. So this is how we know them as theocratic states. So, but as against theocratic states, secular states are supposed to follow. For example, separation of religion from state. You know, separation of religion from state. So in every state, you have politics being practiced, religion also being practiced. People do not have only one dimension, political dimension. People have got multiple dimensions of life. So they have religious dimension as well. Now the question is separating religion from the state. If you mix up religion and state, then there are problems. Problems in terms of minority apprehensions. Therefore, secular states are supposed to separate one from the other. They should be delinked. So that is the only way you can claim that you are a secular state. Otherwise, you will become a theocratic state. And what else? Minimize the role of religion in public sphere, public-private affair. So the state and government should not play a bigger role as far as religion is concerned. Secular states do not mean that they are anti-religion. Okay, secular states have nothing to do with religion as far as public affairs are concerned, as far as private affairs are concerned. But beyond that, they can also promote. See, secular states can promote, can practice, but they should not promote only one particular religion. Okay, only when you become biased, you become supporter of one particular religion, then problems come. Then minorities will have apprehensions. So, no state or official religion. So, state should not have any religion of its own, like what I said in theocratic countries like Pakistan, Nepal, and elsewhere in Latin American countries. They're all Christian states, for example. In Gulf and Arab areas, Islamic states. So, unlike that, in Nepal, as I mentioned, it is that. So, the no state official, hope it is understandable. I don't have to explain much on that. No state should have religion of its own. Rather, they should promote religions equally. Our religion should be promoted equally. That means equal distance to religion. You should maintain equidistance. If you protect A religion, you should also protect B religion. If you promote A religion, you should also protect B religion. So that's what is Sarva Dharma Samabhavana. This is what is International Congress policy from the independence and after. Sarva Dharma Samabhavana. You should have same feeling, same viewpoint, same approach, same attitude towards one and all religions. But you know, Professor Rajiv Bhargav, whose name I referred, mentioned that no, it is not like that. International Congress or Indian government is not maintaining the Sarva Dharma Samabhavana. Rather, they are maintaining principled distance. Principled distance is something that is left to concerned political parties. So, International Congress, when it suits, it tries to cooperate with the Hindu-oriented institutions and organizations. When it suits, it supports Muslim-oriented institutions and political parties, Muslim leagues, etc. So, principled distance is what International Congress and Government of India for so long has been following, according to Professor Rajiv Bhargava. But that's the reason why he believes that the Indian secularism has been misused, rather it has been abused. And then you have constitution. Therefore, what he comes down to is constitutional secularism. So what you have in India in secularism is nothing but constitutional, means as per constitution that the secularism has to be pursued, followed. Otherwise, party political secularism. So on the basis of political parties, that the secularism has been practiced. Now in this slide, constitutional secular states and minority. Besides India, United States, France, Turkey, Mexico, South Korea are also those that follow constitutional secularism. They believe in secularism and its principles. But of course, it varies from state to state. No identical governance with regard to religion. Different countries have different outlooks, different attitudes towards religion. For example, in the United States, they are not totally in distance from religious practices. Rather, they take the Bible and do that oath of office and things like that. But France is different. Turkey is different. Turkey was once an Islamic state, but over a period of time, it has amended it. It has become a secular state. And Mexico, South Korea, in the recent past, they had also become like that. Of course, there is no identical governance with regard to religion. As in India, France and Turkey, they believe more on equality before law. So Indian Constitution speaks in so many words, particularly in the fundamental rights part 3, that all are equal before law. So irrespective of your community, caste, etc., all are equal. Of course, there is subject to certain reservations. That's a different issue. So India, France, and Turkey, they go by the law book and the equality before law. That should be in the eyes of law. Now, any modern state is supposed to be service state, service-oriented state. They should not simply be maintaining law and order. They should also be promoting welfare of the people in different ways, whether their rights, whether their obligations have to be respected and implemented. So modern states usually prefer neutrality rather than blanket separation. You know, the most of the modern states, including India, I think they would like to remain neutral rather than separating religion and politics one from the other, because these two are so combined. These two are like a kinds of a kind that you cannot separate one from the other. I've got a religious identity. I've also got a political perception. So you cannot do away one from the individual. So therefore, it is not possible, basically. That's why most of the modern states are maintaining neutrality. But mind you, the secular state alone is one that guarantees religious rights of all people, irrespective of community. As the Indian Constitution gives one of the fundamental rights, right to protect religious interests. Okay, your religious institutions, your religious education, your cultural aspects. So these are all protected. This, we think, only secular states can do it. You cannot expect protecting the religious rights of people in any theocratic state, in any Islamic state or a Hindu state, because India is a secular state. I think really rights of all, religious rights of all are being protected. Of course, minorities, religious interests can be protected. When you protect religious rights of one and all, that includes minorities as well. And they can be protected better only in countries like India, where you have secularism. But in Bangladesh, Pakistan and all, Nepal, I think it is not possible, as experiences say. So unlike theocratic states, secular states are more progressive as well, because the very basis of secularism is progress, the scientific outlook. That is what is responsible for the divide between kings and popes during the ancient period. So in this slide, Indian secularism, historically, as I had already given you an idea, Indian secularism has a distinguished place in the civilization. We've been secular throughout, though you may not describe it as such. There were coexistence of many religions, yet communal harmony prevailed in the country. Emperor Ashoka, for example, Emperor Akbar, Maharaja Ranjit Singh promoted it. So, despite the rulers belong to a particular community, particular religion, but yet there was social harmony prevailed even before Indian independence. That's the point which we need to note. This tradition led to even Mahatma Gandhi's preaching of Hindu-Muslim unity, and that was costly because he had to pay his life because of the Hindu-Muslim unity when he was on fast in after fast in Noakhali and when he came to Delhi, you know, as to how Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated, exclusively for the sake of the preaching social harmony among different communities, particularly Hindus and Muslims. Now, as I mentioned short while ago, in the introduction itself, Constituent Assembly debates, K.T. Shah was one who was having a particular outlook. He wanted that it should be included in the constitution. But Sardar Patel was one who was opposed to it. Sardar Patel opposed it because he was a little conservative. K.T. Shah was different. But Nehru was a progressive and they had different views. So Nehru, like Ambedkar, was feeling that this state should be, there should be no such thing. Once Indian state becomes equal state that takes care of needs of one and all, then perhaps that will solve the problem. There is no need of mentioning. That's the reason why, even if K.T. Shah wanted, nobody else, because there was conflict from Patel side, conservative section in the Indian National Congress. So it was kept aside. It was kept pending. So Dr. Ambedkar and others, they were, as I mentioned, there is no need of specific mention in the Constitution, because Ambedkar was feeling that a state should be just. Just state is one which takes care of interests of one and all. So Dr. Ambedkar simply wanted that Indian state should become a just state that should promote equality, liberty, fraternity, social justice, so that takes care of needs of whether you are a minority or majority. Then Nehru described composite culture as its great strength during that period. Now, coming to Indian experiences, explicit or implicit, constitutional secularism. I think I have 34 minutes. Right. Constitutional secularism, equal respect for all. So this is what is Indian context. Indian secularism is about equal respect for all religions, irrespective of your size. As I mentioned, Hinduism may be of 80% size, other religions may be of 20% altogether, but yet there should be same treatment, same respect, equal respect for all religions. This is what is Indian, either explicitly or implicitly. You need to check it. Now, the next constitutional provisions, as I had already mentioned, fundamental right, DPSP, etc. are there. They talk about this equal treatment to all, okay, whether in education, employment, etc. So this has been, so there is no specific criteria for religion or caste or identity, except in the case of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, there is equal treatment to one and all. Now, keeping this in view, Nehruvian secularism. Nehru is one who is more progressive, and within the Congress party as well, he tried to influence majority section. Though he was a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, but he had his own liberal outlook, Western outlook, more than Mahatma Gandhi. And he could also ensure the implicit mention or implicit mention of this secularism in various constitutional provisions in the 1950 itself, when the Constitution of India came into existence. Now, when you come down to Indira Gandhi, his daughter, when she became Prime Minister in the wake of Lal Bahadur Shastri's death, so Indira Gandhi was in a very uncomfortable position. She was not in a position to command the Indian National Congress as a party or the government. Therefore, she wanted to do something whereby she can control Indian National Congress and government, though she was Prime Minister. So the political and explicit mention of secularism was there in preamble 1976. You know, 42nd Constitution Amendment Act was considered as a mini constitution, because there were several provisions, not only secularism added, there were several provisions. Even socialism was also added. So India had become socialist countries. India had become secular country since 1976. But you know, in practice, what we see, whether we are socialist or capitalist or semi-capitalist, well, that's apart. So preamble, as I mentioned in the beginning, it may be a preface, it may be an index, it may be face of the Constitution, but it is not part and parcel of the constitution. So therefore, even if you mention for the sake of public consumption, for the sake of political consumption, the secularism is not constitutional, even after 1976. But yet, post 76 scenario, it's more theoretical and less practice approach. Because you may write so many things in your constitution or in your acts, enactments, but when it comes to implementation, there is hardly any scope. That's what we have seen in number of acts, enactments in this country. So what are the secular implications for minorities? So secularism is not about political alone. It has got social implications. So in society, they feel comfortable. They don't feel suffocated. In economy also, they will have equal treatment. So politics, of course. So the secular implications are there for minority. Therefore, minorities would like to have secularism being implemented in toto, so that they will have all opportunities like majority communities. So as far as political implications for minorities are concerned, though they have equal treatment, but yet when it comes to voting, fine, they will have rights, voting rights. But when it comes to contest, not many political parties are ready to give tickets to the Muslims, for example, Christians, for example, Sikhs, for example, because every political party would like to attain the political power or retain the political power. They want to win the seat. So only winning people. So they calculate in terms of religious background. So that is the reason why political implications are little adverse, harmful for minorities. But otherwise, that's the reason why nowadays political representatives are very less, whether in parliaments and assemblies. So this is now coming to the secularism as a basic structure, which I had mentioned somewhere in the beginning, that because it is considered as a basic structure, that it cannot be violated, it cannot be overridden, it cannot be negated. So secularism in Bombai's case, but before that there were cases which I mentioned here in Keshavanand Bharati case in 1973, that started about basic structure issue as to how fundamental rights related case, but that's considered as basic structure. Later in Bommai case, SR Bommai case, not present Bommai, his father, SR Bommai, who was also Chief Minister of Karnataka once. So in that case, the secularism was brought to the notice of the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court considered secularism is also like fundamental rights, like also other basic features as one of the basic structures of the Constitution. Then, so therefore, sorry, I move to the fifth point. Constitutional understanding is unclear, despite the fact that there is a mention of secularism in the preamble, but yet there is hardly any clarity as far as constitutional understanding, because the preamble is not part of the constitution, however significant it may be. The parliament is all we know all as the number game, numerical strength. So just because of numbers, so communities are little scared, particularly minorities are little scared wherever they lack majority in any seat, in any assembly segment or parliament segment. So there were attempts by political parties because of number game, because of majority vote bank. There were attempts to dilute basic spirit of secularism at times. Political parties did, governments did, various organizations did in their own way. But Supreme Court tried to protect the secularism as basic structure since it began in Keshavanand Bharati case in 73. By 1994, it ended up saying that secularism is a basic structure, therefore one should not try to play with it. Then what are the political interpretations, Congress and non-Congress regimes? Congress as usual has been promoting the fabric of this country, unified fabric, as we were there before partition. So it stick to its position. But at times Congress also tried to collaborate with Islamic fundamentalists sometimes, Hindu fundamentalists some other times. Whether you take the cases of Ayodhya or you take the Shah Bano case in 1985. So there were questions, there was criticisms against Indian National Congress Party as well. And non-Congress regimes, unlike BJP, unlike Jansangh, the many other parties tried to maintain secular credentials, tried to protect secularism in their preachings, in their practices. No political party other than rightists were, creating communal problems. So the political interpretations vary from party to party, as lawyers also play with the constitution, and they argue in different ways. They take different positions. Similarly, political parties too. That is the reason why minority implications are there uh, with apprehensive outlook. Due to, and at times, state try to impose its views that this is what is to be done. Okay, as far as public work is concerned. In the next slide, secularism and minorities. As I said, these two are also have same different sides of a coin, because secularism needs secularism protects minorities. Minorities need secularism. So there's a close relationship exists between these two. But this has been at stake at different points of time, because given majority-oriented society, social hierarchy in an Indian context, though one can imagine the fate of secularism, as somebody wrote. So secularism is not, in the good books of the governments, particularly when ruled by majority-oriented, parties. So Indian state, whether they are central governments or state government, seem to be biased, apparently. I had given you two examples of Shah Bano case or Ayodhya case as to how Rajiv Gandhi government was responsible for opening the Pandora box Ayodhya case. Similarly, to balance that, he tried to open the Shah Bano case, but the Supreme Court did not accept Rajiv Gandhi's viewpoint, his amendment in the constitution. Therefore, the Shah Bano case was responsible for communalizing the polity at that point of time in Indian politics. Now, the political regimes, political parties that control governments or political regimes, dominant regimes, they try to mix religion for power, sometimes nakedly, sometimes, in implicit manner, in an indirect manner. But since they aim at vote bank, they aim at political power, they have to gain vote bank politics. That's the reason why mixed religion for power purpose, for political purpose, is being evident in so many cases. I can give examples, but I'd already given some, but there are some more examples. If time permits, we can give. Now, political secularism is what I mentioned in the earlier slide also. This is preaching as per changing political needs. See, at one point of time, you were in need of Muslim League. At another point of time, you were in need of some other organization. So, on the basis of your seats, on the basis of your votes, political parties had become, changing their colors. So that's the reason why, as he said, political secularism is, Rajiv Bhargav said, political secularism is what has been practiced in the Indian context in the recent past. And interrogating secularism and its practice, obviously, everybody starts questioning secularism, as if secularism is a casualty, as secularism is to take blame for whatever type of division that we have in the society. No. For example, why, when some people interrogate secularism and some people question secularism and its credentials, they attribute the falseness. They call secularists as pseudo-secularists, for example, as fake secularists, for example, and their practices have been criticized particularly by rightist parties, whether Muslim parties or Christian parties or Hindu-oriented parties. That's the reason why secularism has become a casualty over a period of time in the Indian context. But you know what happens? Negating secular traditions, whatever traditions that we've been passing through for so long in the pre-independence period and after. See, if you negate it, then you will have costly issues, particularly for minorities, because their number is so less. They are not significant as far as the government and the center is concerned. Minorities can hardly influence the national government because their numbers in the Lok Sabha are very few. Even except a couple of states like, for example, Kashmir, or maybe some northeastern states that are under the influence of Christianity. All other states are largely influenced by dominant religion in India, Hinduism. Therefore, if you negate secular traditions, then the minorities, wherever they are in the Kashmir, Northeast, or any other state, they will have very harmful consequences, particularly for a costly affair for the minorities. In this slide about secular debates, mostly it's a political debate, as I mentioned. So ideological positions, secularism is being attached with nationalism, some political parties. Some political parties say it has nothing to do with it. For example, BJP and right-wing parties, they talk in terms of nationalism rather than secularism. Okay, rather they talk about religiosity. So religion is implicit, but nationalism is explicit. That is how they take ideological positions at the cost of secularism. This is what one could see in the recent happening as to how the regime, the present regime, Modi regime, from 2014 onwards, for the past 8 years or 9 years, we could witness that this ideological position has become so naked that religion is being covered with nationalism. So BJP claims that it is a nationalist party, but its activities are different. Its activities are more towards religion oriented, dominant religion oriented. That is the reason why there is a panic-ridden situation among minorities, be they Muslims or Christians in various parts of the country. Now, Nehruvian understanding, as we already noted, that's whether it is Western or Gandhian, it was mostly Western liberal. Uh, though Gandhi was also for secularism, but he was also Hindu religious person. So Gandhi did not want that these two to be delinked. Religion and politics cannot be delinked. They need not be delinked. That's the case with Gandhi. But Nehru was of some sort of Western oriented. He was feeling that there is no need of linking these two. Secularism should be promoted only when it is delinked from the religion. So state can become secular only when it doesn't practice, it doesn't promote religion. So that is a Nehruvian understanding. And Indira Gandhi's intervention, I said it's mostly for political purpose, for public consumption, for political power gains, that she wanted secularism be used or abused. But she didn't contribute much for the sake of secularism or for promoting the interests of any particular community. That is how critics point out as far as Indira Gandhi's inclusion of secularism in the preamble or thereafter. Then the centrist Congress regimes mostly try to appease both majority as well as minority. I said on several occasions the International Congress tried to sail with the majority community, and also simultaneously tried to sail with the minority. It played a very balancing act in the National Congress when it was ruling at the center for several decades, particularly in the initial 2 decades of Indian independence. But whether it was appeasement or not many people questioned that time. But nowadays, yes, there is scope for questioning the Congress positions as well. Particularly after Rajiv Gandhi and after, we notice that the appeasement policy has been there. That is the reason why there is scope for parties like BJP, parties like Janasangh to emerge stronger. When a government, central government appeases a minority community, okay, for the sake of votes or seats, then obviously there is scope for the rightist parties, and maybe that contributed for the rise of BJP in the country. Otherwise, the party with 2 Lok Sabha seats in 1984 could become biggest party in the country today. It is precisely because of failure of Indian National Congress and its secular policy. It did not stick to its Sarvadharma Samabhavana. Rather, at times it appeased with the others. Now, coming to the rightist BJP-led NDA regimes, as long as Vajpayee's regime was there, first BJP-led regime, NDA 1 perhaps, there was not much scope to communalize politics in the country. You know, George Fernandez, who was defense minister of the country, was a socialist leader for so long, was the chairman of that NDA 1, George Fernandez. So you can imagine how that NDA could not become the communal-oriented or Hindu-oriented combination, political combination. But things changed. And this was also in response to the Congress strategies. What all Congress tried to do before, as part of appeasing one or the other communities, BJP-led India regimes also tried to reverse the same. What Congress tried to appease, BJP also tried to reverse the same. It also tried to appease, particularly only one community, that is Hinduism. BJP never tried to appease Muslim community or Christian community. In fact, BJP did not field Muslim candidates, whether in Gujarat or in UP, okay, in several assembly elections, parliament elections. BJP is hardly interested. That shows as to how nakedly BJP-led India was promoting the community, the dominant community interests in a way. Now, as far as the socialist and leftist politics, they have become insignificant today. As I mentioned, socialists and communists, Naxalite parties were there very strong till 1980s or so. But after globalization and after these socialist parties, leftist parties have become so insignificant that their talk of secularism is also not taken seriously by anybody. So though these socialist and leftist parties are serious as far as secularism is concerned, they preach what they practice. They practice what they preach as far as secularism is concerned. But that's not the case with either International Congress or BJP or other rightist parties in the country. So, and unfortunately or fortunately, now that we have coalition regimes, what you mean by coalition regimes are the government of many parties. When no single party dominates, secures a majority in the Lok Sabha or Assembly, then they will go for multi-party governance. Electoral alliance will contribute to that coalition regimes. And you know, you can have alliance with any sort of party belonging to any ideology, left or right or center. So this is what is responsible for the rise of coalition regimes at the center or in several states in the country today. Now, in the last couple of things, I'll focus more and more on this recent trends, particularly though I'd given you a little bit on BJP's politics in the recent past, particularly after Vajpayee's regime, particularly after Dr. Manmohan Singh, 2014 onwards. You have Jammu and Kashmir, how it has been treated, ill-treated, and therefore Article 370, which has its historical necessity, in fact. See, otherwise, the Kashmir would always have been a problem with Pakistan, but thanks to the secular promises, secular provisions in the Constitution of India, perhaps the Jammu and Kashmir became part and parcel of Indian Union. Therefore, there was certain special status that was considered justified to give special status to Jammu and Kashmir, but that could not continue for long, particularly after 2014, the BJP emerging as the national ruling party at the center with full majority. So you have Jammu and Kashmir became union territory, Ladakh being removed as another union territory. So J&K may become another state one day, but though it is Islam dominated, Muslim dominated state, but they hardly have any choice to have now Article 370 back again. Because Article 370 is their identity, Kashmiri identity. See, it's not given to any other state in the country. Why Kashmir? The people have to understand, people have to think. So there was a historical background, historical necessity. So that's the reason why Jammu and Kashmir's special status was justified by International Congress, Socialist parties, Communist parties, all parties minus BJP for so long, but that it has been done away with by the Modi regime in the name of equal status to one and all. Why special treatment to Jammu and Kashmir or Muslim state in the country? Now, besides that, directive principles of state policy, though there is a mention of uniform civil code or cow slaughter, etc., but they could not be implemented for so long. But now that this present regime wants to implement even this uniform civil code, because uniform civil code should not be understood as majority civil code. But unfortunately, there is an impression going on in the country that it is going to be Hindu civil code, something like that. So that is the reason why there are lots of apprehensions among Muslims, because every religion has got its private rights, their marriage rights, divorce rights, personal rights, family rights. For example, Sharia in Islam, they have their, in the Hindus, they have their own marriage, family, traditional, these rights. So in the name of uniform civil code, you cannot poke your nose into the personal life of different religious people. As much as they believe in polity, they also believe in their religion. So no state or no government should interfere or play with the religious sentiments of the people. But unfortunately, in the recent trends, we are going to see. We've been watching this. Maybe in the days to come, even uniform civil code may become a reality if the BJP continues with this sort of attitude towards minorities in the country. Now, in the name of cow slaughter, also we have seen as to how there were killings, target killings, particularly Muslim youth, Muslim businessmen. And in the name of love jihad as well, there were issues. And Bangladesh refugees have been treated in a different way. For example, Hindus have come to India as mostly Bangladesh refugees because they were minorities in Pakistan, in East Pakistan, that's what is Bangladesh. But the government of the day has been treating them in a different way when it comes to CAA issue. So Muslim personal laws have not been followed, have been interfered with, whether it's about talak issue or nikah or other issues. The central government is poking its nose in different dimensions of Muslim personal laws. So this is an apprehension, serious apprehension as far as Muslims are concerned. And similarly, in Ayodhya judgment too, though it was kept pending for decades and decades, and they just tried to justify the demolition of Babri Masjid, and maybe they are going to do the same in the case of Kashi Mathura temples in Varanasi. Because the Supreme Court judgment, on the one hand, the criticizing the demolition, they allotted the same piece of land to the Hindu trust. That means even Supreme Court is having a contradictory view. There are criticisms about Supreme Court judgment, though there was one Muslim who was part of the judgment, that bench, that delivered judgment in favor of the Ayodhya temple. So Muslims particularly have been critical of such things. Not only Muslims, even secular Indians are also concerned about the way Ayodhya judgment has been delivered and it has been implemented. Now on the spot where the Babri Masjid was demolished, they are going to construct Ram Mandir, is something that goes against the secular traditions of this country, despite the fact that Supreme Court has allowed it as per its jurisdiction. Now, political polarization along communal lines is been there, is very open now. Communal political parties are taking communal sides. That's the reason why a party, for example, BJP, is naked about different communal issues, but that's not the case with a few other parties. Though there are some reservations as far as Congress party is concerned, left parties have got their own differences. So in any case, the approach of most of these parties are targeting the minorities. Okay, even the centrist party like Indian National Congress remains, spectator, silent spectator at times. As a result, the minorities are under attack, under target. So in a secular country like India, if India is a Hindu country, then nobody will question it. But India is a secular country. That's the issue. So Hindu-Muslim parties are there, of course, for vote bank politics, but yet attacks on minorities continue to take place in the name of cow slaughter, or in the name of love jihad, in the name of other aspects, statements against Quran or statements against something. These things are happening. In the recent past, we witnessed BJP's Nupur Sharma tweeting about a prophet that led to outrage, and various violent incidents took place in the country, as a result of which Indian government had to say apology to the West Asia, because West Asia is dominated by Islamic countries, Muslim countries, but the India had to play very softly on that issue. But as on date, I think Nupur Sharma is not yet punished in any serious way. Of course, legal course takes its own place. Now, the violent incidents are there everywhere. You have seen in Udaipur, Rajasthan, and similarly in Amaravati, in various other parts of the country. We every day, day in and day out, we witness newspapers report as to how communal incidents are taking place in a big way. So they are not being projected, they are not being covered in the media, because media is also biased. That is how minorities feel today. Minorities have their apprehensions because all the three estates have failed: legislature, executive, judiciary, to protect their interests. Even the media, that's considered to be the fourth estate, supposed to maintain neutrality, a balanced approach towards one and all, but is taking the sides of majority religion. So that way, that has become very costly as far as minority interests are concerned. So these are some concerns. Say democracy and secularism. So country implications for minorities. So only if you minorities prefer both democracy, but democracy means head counting. So in the name of democracy, secularism is under attack. Take for example in Indian context in the recent past. So though they like that, but therefore they have to, they are in a contradiction position as to what should we do. If we are for secularism, then the democracy is not allowing us to have our say as per our proportional strength. So it's a contradictory picture. So it's a contradiction. So it's a concern to all secularists today, more particularly to the minorities. The constitutional ambiguity, as I had already mentioned, this constitution is not that clear as far as the secularism, its theory, secularism, its meaning, secularism in its practice, secularism in its implementation is concerned. There's hardly any clarity, therefore it is still ambiguous. So, of course, there is some hope with the preamble amendment, though it was considered as an afterthought. It's only 1976 introduction, that in the preamble. So, as I had already argued, that it is only for political purpose that it had been done. There is nothing new that one can add, one can infer from this preamble-based, the secular mention in the Constitution. Therefore, it lacks legal power. So, secularism as such is part of the basic structure of the Constitution, but yet there are cases, there are instances where the secularism has not been protected even by the judiciary, because there lacks legal power, unlike other constitutional provisions. So you take fundamental rights, for example. Fundamental rights can be protected if they are violative. But that's not the case with this. So secularism is not a part of fundamental rights in any serious way. Therefore, one cannot protect it. Therefore, judicial interventions, they are unreliable. At times they support the ruling party at the center. At times they support a majoritarian view. At other times they give their own view. But in any case, judiciary is not taken for granted that it is there to justify the secular positions. It is there to support secularism. It is there to protect the interests of minority. Nothing like that. And most of the cases, particularly in the recent past, even judicial interventions are also about majority oriented judgments, be it Ayodhya or few others. And therefore, political regimes have, and one more thing, as far as polity is concerned, political parties also change their positions, and they are also not reliable anymore. As per the needs of the day, as per the needs of their politics, they take positions that way. The minority apprehensions are there forever, and there's no political party which is ready to take care. Though there are minority-based political parties like Maya, Muslim League, etc., they hardly count in the Lok Sabha 542. There may be one member or two members. They may raise their voice, but yet the ruling party, other parties are not going to protect the interests. So that way, their apprehensions have become very, very genuine over a period of time. Now the bureaucracy as usual is dance to the tunes of the legislature. So yes, boss type of situation. So even if you have IAS, IPS officials, the bureaucrats also take the position of the government of the day, and accordingly they play, accordingly they act, and therefore there is hardly any solace, there is hardly any support for these people. Okay, I conclude. Then media debates also same situation. They I had already mentioned about how media in the recent past is creating hype on various communal issues, but at the end of the day, they hardly uh, settle the minority issues. So minority perceptions are there. They are also changing as per this thing. So as far as concluding remarks are concerned, unlike Western notions and practices, Indian understanding is unique. It's very different, but ambiguous. Indian state society views coincide as far as majoritarianism at the cost of minorities. So as Indian society thinks, Indian state also believes, Indian state also acts. That is a way in democracy because majority counts. The constitutional scope is unclear, as I had already said. So preamble amendment is simply political. Hence, social harmony, peace, or casualties, thus minorities suffer. Time to promote plural society like Indian to establish a secular society. It is essential for a social reform movement rather than a politically led project. Okay, so it's not that through a political led political led project that you can implement secularism. Secularism is through a social reform movement. That's how I think they can take care of apprehensions of them. Minorities can network with similar other minorities, religious wise, otherwise. As a last resort, judicial decisions should be forthright and impartial. Ultimately, strong secular state alone can protect minority interests. I think, thank you. Yes, I think time is over.
Yeah, sir.
Yes, I should, yeah.
Yeah. So, Savati, thank you so much, sir, for deliberating, for giving a very eye-opening lecture on the secularism and touching all the important points, which many of us we don't know. So really, it is a very informative. So one participant, she is asking one question: why is the religious identity or adherence popular among the developing or undeveloped societies?
Yes, yes. To answer it in simple words, most of the developing or underdeveloped societies have been having traditions as the strong roots. Since the traditions dominate our lifestyle, so the religion or religious influence certainly dominates individuals. Therefore, religious identity or people's faith in a particular religious identity is foremost and therefore popular. So this is what I think is a simple answer.
Okay. So thank you so much, sir. Now all the questions, whatever the doubt they put, it is also clear. So thank you so much, Professor Reddy. On behalf of the HRDC Mizoram University, I extended my thanks to you for sparing your valuable time and your expertise with the participant. Thank you so much, sir. Now you may leave, sir, if you want, because other speaker already joined and we have to start our next class.